So I definitely want to thank everybody for their willingness to be a part of this conversation. Now, why when I hit that, it went away, I don't know. Okay. Um, so I do have a PowerPoint that's a part of these normal conversations. And at the same time, Juliana, who is the program assistant for our program as well as a number of other programs, is on the call with us today. And she's going to be sort of helping with the recording and helping with monitoring the chat. So if you're interested in asking a question, because sometimes I do go on, please feel free to use the chat, and Juliana will help us by kind of, stopping me when she needs to and saying, oh, you got some questions. And at the end, absolutely, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have that haven't actually been, articulated yet, because it's each person has some unique concerns or has some unique questions, and that's perfectly fine. So we'll be able to definitely address anything that we don't talk about during the course of the session. So I'm going to share my screen. And one of the things about sharing the screen is that it means that it's not always easy for people to see each other. So if you again, have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. So hopefully everybody is interested in where we're going to be talking about today, about the counselor education program here at Ohio State University. Our website, there are actually two websites. One website is organized by the university, and so it is formatted with all the information that the university says is important. And then this one here, this go.osu.edu/counseloreducation, is actually our website with all the information on it that we feel is important for you to have. It has a page for applicant people who are interested in the program, a page for current students, a page for site supervisors, a page for KCREP information and that kind of thing. So I would encourage you to, if you've been on the university website, to also visit go.osu.edu/counseloreducation and visit our website because it has more relevant information, I think, that will be important for you. I'm Colette Dollarhide. I have a very bad habit of not bothering to introduce myself. So I am Dr. Colette Dollarhide. My students call me Dr. D. I'm a full professor and I'm the program chair. And my email address is dollarhide.1@osu.edu. So the Dollarhide is one word. And I'm very, very glad that you're here. I appreciate that. When you're thinking about graduate study, it takes a lot of information to make you to help you feel comfortable that this is indeed where you want to invest your time, your energy, your effort, your resources. And I appreciate the fact that it's important to get these questions answered. So hopefully this will give you a good idea of what it is that we're all about and kind of give you a sense of whether or not this is a good fit for you. So in terms of the program, we've, ever since our program began, we've been in the top 10 of the national rankings in terms of US News and World Report. We're very proud of that because we work very hard to make sure that our students get the best possible training that they can in our field, as well as in all of the nuances and the current events and this kind of thing. You'll I hope see sort of what that means in a few moments when we talk about the emphasis of the program. We are fully KCREP accredited. Accreditation is not that much an issue at the master's level. It is at the PhD level. At the master's level, what KCREP means to you is that our program meets all the standards of national, the national body who accredits counseling programs, but it also means that those of you in the clinical mental health program, that our program is approved by the state of Ohio. So only KCREP approved programs can, only graduates of KCREP approved programs can sit for or qualify for counselor licensure in the state of Ohio. All of our faculty are involved with national service. I'm currently the president of Counselors for Social Justice. I actually start my presidency at the end of this month. And so we're doing national events relative to Black Lives Matter and in support of the efforts to eradicate racial inequities, systemic and individual, across the country. So counselors are very involved in social justice, and I'm really proud to be the president of the national organization, founder of the state organization, and the advisor for CSJ at OSU. We have two student organizations. One is Counselors for Social Justice, and one is Chi Sigma Iota, which is an honorary society within counseling. And I'm just sharing our research interests with you, but there is no expectation. Our students do not typically do a thesis. Many master's programs do require a thesis. We do not. We have a comprehensive exam at the end of our program. If you desire to do a thesis, you can do so. You want to talk early about that with your advisor. But our faculty are involved with suicide prevention, biofeedback, professional identity development, leadership, as I mentioned, social justice, and then evidence-based school counseling. So these are just some of the topics that some people get interested in research and would like to be a part of these research projects, and there's no expectation. You're not expected or compelled to at all. But if you're interested, talk to your faculty, because we would be happy to have you on the team. So this slide gives you an idea of who the contact people are if you have additional questions. In terms of the admissions process is all electronic. And sometimes people email and say, oh, I'm not able to upload this document. And I'm like, I got nothing, I'm afraid. So the email that you need to send your questions to, if there are any issues or concerns about uploading your documents, et cetera, for the admissions application, you want to send that to edstudies@osu.edu. And then if you have questions specifically to the clinical mental health counseling track, Dr. Darcy Hogg Granello, and her email address is granello.1@osu.edu. And then if you have questions about school counseling or about the PhD program, I'd be the person you would want to go ahead and contact. Again, dollarhide.1@osu.edu. All of our faculty and staff have this extender at the end, osu.edu. And so sometimes you'll hear people who just give them, their information, like, I'm dollarhide.1. And then you're like, what the world does that mean? So the extension is @osu.edu, just so you know. Any questions so far? Are we okay? Yeah, okay, thanks. Sometimes people come to these conversations because they're not really sure whether counseling is the path that they want to follow in life, or whether or not there are other options for helping that make sense for them. So the three top areas that tend to be kind of mushed together and kind of conflated and squished together is social work, psychology, and counseling. Each of these professions are distinct. And each of these professions has a distinct training protocol, training tradition, if you will, and yet they do overlap. So I know this slide might look kind of squishy, but psychology is this blue bubble, and it tends to focus more on the medical model and primarily focus on mental illness as in terms of schizophrenia, in terms of the DSM diagnoses. It does overlap with counseling because we also are looking at pathology, but our focus is on wellness. We're looking at how do we help people perpetuate or get back on a developmentally healthy path in terms of their life choices and in terms of their life functioning. We tend to follow a humanistic tradition where the relationship between the helper and the client is deemed to be a priority in the process. And then social work really looks closely at how do we help our clients to access social organizations and supports that can help them function effectively in society. So social work takes a look at what are the agencies, what are the organizations that can help people to maintain, for example, their housing, their employment. If they're food insecure, how do we help them secure, nutritional supplements, et cetera. So traditionally, social work overlaps with psychology because there was early professionalization of both of those professions. And social work and counseling overlap in terms of looking at social justice and how do organizations, institutions, and systems impede the development of our clients. All three focus on helping. All three perform helping. And if, for example, those of you who are thinking about school counseling, you're going to see all three of these professionals in a school, and you're going to be working with all three of these professionals. If you're going into clinical and mental health counseling, you're also going to be working with our community colleagues who are psychologists and licensed independent social workers. So it's important to understand that, and I'm not saying that this is a blanket absolute model for how every single person who practices looks at their profession, but this is one way as you're thinking about what's a good fit for you. This might help you to give you some insight into things that you believe are important about how you want to be as a helper. Are there any questions? No?
No questions just yet.
Okay. See, as what I do is and when I ask that, if there's no answer, I assume no is the answer. So no questions. So yeah, that's great. But I do want you to like let Juliana know or let me know if you have questions and would like me to slow down. So as I mentioned, I think when we started this conversation, we have 3 programs, 2 at the master's level and 1 at the PhD level. Because the master's degree is considered the terminal degree, what that means is you can go into practice and be a fully licensed professional counselor at the master's level. You don't need the PhD level to be a clinician in counseling. So the licensure comes at the end of the master's degree in both clinical mental health counseling and in school counseling. For the PhD, our program is designed for people who want to go into the professoriate, people who want to go into counselor education. And so we look for people who already have a master's degree in counseling to apply for the PhD. And we do regularly, I think every year, we have 1 or 2 people who enjoy their training and believe that they are ready to jump into a PhD. So we do have people who do remain with us after they complete their master's in order to pursue the PhD. What we do in that instance is we work really hard to help you get the field experience that you need so that when you go into the classroom to teach counseling, you're talking about your own personal experience in the field. Overall, though, no matter which program you're in, all of our conversations are around 2 topics. 1, leadership in the field, and 2, social justice. It is.
Dr. Dollarhide,
Yeah.
before you get into that, we do have one question.
Yes.
Erin wants to know, she's interested in the PhD program, and would she have to complete the MA degree separately, or can the master's and the counseling be combined with
they're separate.
the PhD program?
Yeah, they're separate. Yep. So it would be the 2 years to do the master's, and then you would remain for the additional time. Again, some people accomplish it in 3 years, the PhD, and other people take a little bit longer than that. I've seen about 4 years to be about the average. But it is one of the things about our program, about our profession, is I think that you'll hear how much your faculty love the profession and how much we love being counselors. It's a deeply meaningful at an existential level for me and for my colleagues. So. Okay. Our program is a cohort model. And what that means is that everybody starts, when we say it's 2 years full time, it's because everyone starts together, they take their classes together, and they graduate together. And so each cohort stays together for their program. And this provides a variety of benefits that I think are really important to recognize. One is you're learning in a carefully designed sequence so that when you get into every class, we know what you've already had. We know the training that the conversations you've already had. We know what the foundation readings are. We know basically what your assignments have been. So we have a really deep insight into where you are in your journey and how to help you get to that next level. It also means that you're supporting each other because you're able to share questions with each other, study together, talk about concepts. A lot of our cohort members become very, very good friends, and these cohorts remain friends for a long time. They're in each other's weddings. I mentioned that we've had members of cohorts get married. We've had members of cohorts start families and develop long-term partnership. It's really a neat thing. No expectation though. So I don't want anybody to go, wait a minute, what? No, this is not designed that way, but that's it, just sort of thinking about the good friendships that evolve. And our cohorts email each other for many years in the future because they're each other's professional support system. So that's very cool. On occasion, we do have people who, I'm expecting a baby or things have happened in my life and I need to go to 3 years, and that is possible also. We do that not very often, but you would want to let us know if you need to slow down to do the 3 years. In the 2-year program, and I'm going to stop sharing and pull up another document because this other document does a really good job of kind of laying out what the well, it was here a minute ago. Oh, there it is. My apologies. So this, what I've pulled up is on the website. It is, oh, I'm sorry, forgot to share. Forgive me. Good times. Okay. This document, yay. Thank you everybody for your patience. This document gives you an overview of what the courses look like in the program as a cohort. And so in your first semester, you have 5 classes. In the second semester, what looks like 6 classes is not, because these classes are in the same time block, but back to back. In other words, your first 7 weeks in ethics, and then your second 7 weeks, you'll be in career counseling. So this gives you an overview, and this is for the school counseling schedule, of what the 2 years looks like, what the courses look like. And at the bottom of the page is the clinical counseling schedule. So you're together, this is in year 1, in the fall. You are all together, all the school folks and all the clinical folks are in the same classes together. In the spring, you all have group counseling together, ethics together, career counseling together, but practicum and diagnosis then separate out. So the clinical folks are taking unique classes specific to clinical mental health. The school folks don't take diagnosis until they're at the end of their 2nd year. So you're taking a majority of your classes together for the foundation part of your training. And then when you get into the specific part of your training, that's when the 2 paths diverge a little bit, and part of your classes are together, part of your classes are unique. this is how it's done in 2 years. We do not have classes in the summer in counselor ed. I'm going to stop sharing this and going back to the PowerPoint. So I am hoping that that kind of gives you a quick snapshot of what the 2 years might look like. It's a lot of learning, and we know this. We believe that it's not too much learning. We believe that it all supports each other. It fits together like puzzle pieces rather than that class is over there and this class is over here. That's one of the reasons why we have everyone take their classes together. If you're enrolling in classes on your own, because it fits in your schedule or whatever, then we don't have a sense of what your background is, and it seems to, it fractures your experience. This way, it's all one seamless experience. The classes are all in the evening. In all 3 of our tracks, the classes are in the evening. Each class meets for a 3-hour block once a week. Does that make sense? I hope. Yeah, okay. Some people are nodding, so good. That's why I love it when the, the screens are on and I get to see you. Currently, our classes are scheduled from 4 to 7 in the evening, and then from 7 to 10 in the evening. Last year, we took a stab at trying to get that schedule, this 7 to 10 block scheduled earlier in the day, and we were not able to get that. So, and our students all agreed that 7 to 10 was better than 1 to 4, was better than Friday classes, and was better than classes during the day. So we asked our students to give us some feedback, and we looked at the 7 to 10, but it looks like that's we're going to stay for a while. We don't have summer classes in counselor ed. We do have, there are several classes that for everyone. You'll take a class in research, and for the school counseling folks, you'll also take a class outside our program in Introduction to Exceptional Children. And both of those classes are offered in the summer. And so a lot of our students choose to take those classes in the summer. I understand, though, that those classes are more expensive to be taken in the summer than they are during the regular year, because you're already in a full-time schedule in the regular year. So, but we will help you, we'll talk with you about when you'll decide to take those classes. One of the things, though, that I want to really kind of highlight, because I realize you might look at that list and go, holy cow, how do I keep going with, how do I manage all of these classes? The classes are, it's a lot of academic, reading. It's a graduate level program. So yes, there are academic projects, absolutely. But I think it's important to also recognize that equally important to your growth in your conceptual understanding and your skill building is your own personal growth. Because in counseling, you are the instrument of healing for your client. And that's really important to recognize what that means. It means that you need to be as healthy and grounded and self-aware as you can possibly be. The reason is that it's impossible to help people, clients, who bring your problems to you. What I mean by that is, if I'm struggling with an issue in my life, then it's going to be impossible for me to be an instrument of healing for other people struggling with that same issue. If I haven't figured it out for myself, I don't have any tools to facilitate the growth of my client. On a personal level, I have tremendous mental health issues in my family of origin. A lot of substance abuse issues, and 2 siblings diagnosed as bipolar. And so it is, I recognize that my ability to work with chemically or dependent clients, and in my professional work, I always referred clients with chemical dependency issues to other clinicians because it was just too close to some of the issues in my own family. So that's just an example of how important it is that you're thinking about who are you as a human being, where are your growing edges as a human being and as a clinician, so that you don't present to clients with, I don't know what's going on, I got nothing. That's not helpful. It's not helpful for them. It's not helpful for you. So we're helping you work on those things also. And we recommend that our students engage in their own personal counseling. We recognize that students, we have the counseling and consultation services on campus. And we don't know who goes for counseling. We would never intrude on your personal journey in that way, but we strongly recommend, it's helpful for everyone to know, what does it feel like to be on the other side of this process also. Any questions so far? No? Okay. So in the second half of your program, so you've got 2 years, right? So in your fall semester, you're just in coursework. But in spring semester of your first year, you're in practicum. And you're in the field, you're dealing with clients, you're working with clients under very close supervision, but you're working with clients. And then your entire second year is your internship. So it's important to recognize that these field experiences are critical to your training and development as a professional. So for those of you who are interested in school counseling, that second year, that full internship and then the practicum, you're going to graduate with K-12 certification. And what that means is that you need to experience at least 2 levels, elementary and middle, elementary high, high middle, okay? There are 3 levels of education, and you're going to be in at least 2 of them. And we ask you what your preference is, and then we assign you that, because we carefully evaluate all of our sites to make sure that they are appropriate. Because there are traditionally, there are different ways of defining school counseling. We're not training you to be a registrar. We're not training you to be a test giver. We're training you to be a counselor who works in schools. And so counseling is the foundation of your professional identity. And we'll talk more about that, but I just wanted to make that point clear, that we're not training people who just, give tests and tell and advise kids to go to college. No, it's far more nuanced than that. We teach you, how do you help kids to find their path without telling them, because it's so disrespectful for anyone to tell anyone else what their life path should look like. So. And then in clinical counseling, we have a list of counseling clinics, community settings, hospital settings, et cetera, where our students have had successful placements, because we know that every person is going to have a unique interest set of the client and issues. And so we want to help you find where you could get that training, get that field experience. But we don't arrange those for you because it's important for you to get familiar with the community and to understand how to navigate the community. We do have a small number of people who are interested in being a clinical counselor who works in a school setting. We recognize that that interest also exists. There are agencies such as Centero that hires clinical mental health counselors to go into the schools to provide clinical mental health counseling services for students with diagnoses. So if you're interested in the program, that would be something that we would talk about in more detail. Frequently, at least twice, 2 or 3 students each year ask, gee, I'm interested in both, and I would like to have both. How do I go about getting both? And what that would involve is you complete one of these master's tracks, and then you defer your graduation for an additional year in order to complete the courses and the field experiences in the other track. So if you want both, you get one master's degree, but on your transcript, it indicates that you have completed both of these tracks. Does that make sense? I hope. Okay. So we have more and more students all the time who are interested in having that kind of flexibility. I think that's an interesting way of training, preparing yourself for the field. So in terms of the licensure exams for both our school counseling graduates and our clinical mental health counseling graduates, I'm very proud to say 100% of our students pass on the first try. You can retake these exams, but 100% of our students pass on the first try. And what we believe that reflects is the level of training that people go through in our program that gives them all of the skills that they need in order to be successful. I also recognize that this triggers in a lot of people the panic, oh my God, what if I'm the first? What if I'm the first one who doesn't pass on the first try? Don't worry, it won't happen. I really believe it won't happen. It's also important to note, people always ask, what does employment look like for your graduates? 100% of our graduates are employed in the field. The only exception to that is one counselor, school counseling graduate, who went to Texas. In Texas, they require all their school counselors to be certified teachers. She is not a certified teacher. So when she got to Texas, she applied as an admissions counselor in a community college, and she's very happy. She's been there now for 8 years, and is very happy. So I consider her working in the field, but she literally is the only person that I know of who kind of stepped out of that track that she graduated in order to make sure she was able to use her counseling degree. Okay, briefly, and I'm gonna just make this very brief, the PhD program is usually accomplished in 3 years. I've known students who have done it in 3 years and done it very well. I currently have 3 advisees who are doing it in 3 years. It's also possible that people might decide that they need more time, and that is absolutely acceptable. If you need more time, you have up to, 7 years. I'm very excited to say that I've never had anyone take that long, but things happen in life. I mean, we just had an entire spring where lots of things have been happening that have caused some wobbles in people's ability to complete their program. So not only with COVID-19, but also with the protests and people wanting to stand up for social justice, etc. So if it's a 3-year track, then it's 2 years in coursework and 1 year doing a dissertation. And the training is focused on being a counselor educator. And that involves, you would be trained in research, leadership, teaching, and then service. So our training at the PhD level closely parallels what a professor would be doing in the field. Okay. Any questions? No? Okay. Okay. So people frequently ask, how do people make it? How do people do it? This university is a 60,000 person city, literally. Those of you who know the campus know it is 400 buildings. It is 60,000. It's 13 colleges and universities, and I don't know how many courses are offered. It's a huge place. In that huge place, many of our graduate students have been very successful in finding graduate associateships, either in teaching, in research, or in administration. This is generally people's primary focus, is they would much rather finance their education through a graduate associateship. Unfortunately, though, there's no campus-wide list. There's no way to point you to one office and say, here you go, here's what you need to do. Once you're admitted, then you start sending out resumes and you start contacting offices specifically in student services. which is a huge organization that provides counseling. It provides, support services for students with disabilities and a variety of different needs, that financial aid, academic advising. Our students in the past have gotten have been very successful finding graduate associateships based on their individual interests. I will tell you that this coming year, graduate associateships, because of the health emergency in terms of COVID, that some units are talking about they're going to have a reduced number of graduate associateships. So it's important to also think about, are loans going to be part of how you finance your education, or some people work during their program. I've known people who have worked full-time. I worked full-time during both of my graduate degrees with a family. So I know that it's not easy. I also know that for me, it was important. This goal was important. I wanted to be a counselor, and I was going to do what I needed to do in order to get the training to be a counselor. And so I made the choice, and my family made the choice with me, that I worked full-time during my program. I was an administrator in a university, and then doing my PhD, I was a counselor and an administrator at that university, and did that throughout my PhD program. So my point is that I recognize that these decisions are not easy, and I recognize that most people look for the graduate associateships. But I also know that sometimes people need to make other financial decisions in order to reach their goals. So, and we support people making those decisions. We understand those things. Okay. Okay. So I know a lot of people are like, okay, so great, I'm in, or I want to be in, what do I need to do now? So I'm going to give you an overview of the admissions process so that you have a sense of, what it looks like for us, what it might look like for you, for everyone. Yeah.
Dr. Dollarhide, sorry,
Yeah.
Before we move on, we do have another question.
Okay.
Could you get employee financial assistance if you already work for OSU MC?
Yes, we've had a number of people who were OSU employees come through the program. Usually, especially if they were working full-time, for 2 of the 3 I can think of most recently, they did the 3-year track. So absolutely, yeah. It's a good question, thank you. I'd completely forgotten to mention that. Okay, so for everyone, the deadline is December 1 for joining our cohort in the following fall. And I realize that some people are like, whoa, no, that means I have to wait. Yeah, it does. And the reason is that the process of the interviews and reviewing materials and all of that is it takes a long time. So December 1 is the deadline for everyone. Starting early is always a good thing because, letters of recommendation, right? It takes a while. Even though people say, yes, I'll get it done, it takes a while. So the recommendation is to apply early. It is online only. All of your materials you convert and upload to the system. We do require the GRE. We have some flexibility, but what we look for are people whose scores in verbal and quantitative average in the 50th percentile. So that doesn't mean that you have to hit the 50th percentile in both of them. It just means that you have to average in the 50th percentile. We recognize that in our field, the quantitative is less important than the verbal. So the verbal part of the test, that score, is kind of more important for us as we're looking at people's scores. We're hoping that Neither one of those scores dips below the 35th percentile, but again, there is some flexibility. The graduate school sets a 3.0 undergrad GPA as the requirement. We've had people ask for an exception. What the recommendation has been is that people take summer courses in order to bring their undergrad GPA up, because that can be balanced in so that their undergrad GPA is at that 3.0 level. One of the most important documents, I almost said the most important document, but one of the most important documents is the letter of intent. And this is where, in your voice, you're telling us why this matters. What does this mean to you? And what I recommend is that you look at telling us what in your past contributes to your ability to be an instrument of healing for other people. What in your present has compelled you to apply to Ohio State and to our program. And please don't say it's because of the football program. We've actually had people say that. Please don't say that, because we want you to apply to our program because our program represents something that you feel is a good fit for what you need or what you're hoping to attain or achieve. And then tell us about your future. What populations do you hope to work with? How do you see yourself as a counselor? What is it that you believe a counselor does, and how do you believe you could accomplish those things? Okay. We ask for 3 letters of recommendation, and the priority, the preferred, that's a better way of saying it, the preferred letters I think would come from people who know your academic skills, and this would be prior professors if possible, or employers, because we recognize not everyone has just recently graduated from college, right? So employers, that's fine also, but ask them to speak to your ability to learn, right? That's the important thing. What I would not recommend, don't get a letter from your mother. We've had that happen. Please don't do that, because we believe that a letter of recommendation from someone who's close to you like that might not be as objective, right, as some of these other folks might be. So just some thoughts about your letter of recommendation. A lot of times people have questions about this screen. So do you have questions? Because I'm happy to answer them. No? Okay.
Can I do an audio question?
Sure.
Great, thank you. How does, if I'm already in the grad school as a non-degree status, how does the screen look for me?
It's the same process.
And hi, I'm Lisa.
Oh, hi, Lisa. Okay. Yes, it's the same process. If you're already in as a graduate non-degree, the one thing that would be the timeline and the process is exactly the same. We need the same information, but you would be applying, my understanding is that you would be applying for a transfer. I'm not sure on that because of the non-degree status.
Sure, that's my understanding in talking with them also.
Okay.
My GRE would already be on file with the grad school.
Okay. Okay.
That's helpful.
Yes.
Thank
you.
You.
You bet. Okay. So here is the URL.
One more question.
Oh,
sorry. Yes. Is the 3.0 undergrad GPA non-negotiable, or would it be necessary to take more undergrad classes to raise it before applying?
The reason I'm hesitating is that all of these conversations kind of evolve. It is possible for us to request an exception. Okay, so let me back up just real quick. So we do not admit anyone on this campus to any graduate program. All we're doing is we make a recommendation to the graduate school that you be admitted to follow your study in our program. So what that means is that the grad school is the one that actually determines the GPA requirement. And it's the grad school that has set this 3.0 GPA. So when we recommend you for admission, if your GPA is below a 3.0, we have to request an exception. And the grad school only makes infrequent exceptions. So this is why we typically encourage people to either consider taking some additional coursework to try to raise their undergraduate GPA, or if it's, or letting us know that we would be looking to request an exception, looking to request that the grad school grant an exception. So it becomes a process we can't control after that point. Does that make sense? I hope. So in other words, I can't say, yes, you're in, because the grad school may say, no, you're not. And I don't have any control over that. Does that make sense? I hope. Okay.
I think so. We have one more question. If the GRE scores are old from 5 years ago, would you recommend taking it again, or are they still usable?
No, the GRE scores need to be within the last 5 years to be viable. I'm sorry.
Can I ask another question?
Sure.
About GPA? Okay, so I hear you say that it's kind of out of your hands when you ask for an exception. But I'm just curious, when you're asking for that exception, are there like if, because my GPA is not a 3.0. When I was in undergrad, I was in a really toxic, abusive relationship, which led to my grades suffering. So I'm curious if like letters of recommendation and other stuff like that, is that considered when they're looking at the exception, or are they just looking at the numbers?
Thank you for that. That's an excellent question. The more information that we have from your letter of intent that helps us to understand if your GPA is not a 3.0, that helps me to write a better request for exception. And so I feel that I can make a better case for granting that exception if I'm able to say, and this is the reason for that undergrad GPA. And
Okay.
also, when they calculate your undergrad GPA, my understanding is that they calculate it overall, but then they also give us a number that reflects the last 2 years. And sometimes people are not like up to steam, right, with their first 2 years, but then they really hit their stride and they really do better in their second 2 years. So sometimes there are reasons why the overall GPA isn't your best, isn't an accurate reflection of what you can do. So tell us that in your letter of intent, because that would be important to hear. Thank you for asking. Is there anything else? Okay. So if you do decide that this is what you would like to do, here's the instructions about the application process. I saw Chase reach up and actually take a picture of the screen a few moments ago. And so, you know, that's a great way to capture this. It's ehe.osu.edu, and then under the academics tab, you would click on educational studies. And then you would click on the prospective students tab, and then you would see this MA checklist. And this PDF has live links. And so you would just click on the live link and upload the documents. So it's important to kind of go through it beforehand so that you know what the documents are you're going to need to compile. And we recognize too that letters of recommendation, one of the things you might want to consider is requesting 4 letters, so that that way, in case one of them's late, right, that you would still have 3 on file. I would not recommend more than 5, because more than 5, when only 3 are required, might be interpreted as kind of overdoing it. So, so if you want to have a safety person, get 4 letters, but too many, I think, would probably not serve you well. And then for those of you interested in school counseling, there's an additional link, and you input in the same information. At some point, we believe this additional link is going to go away. It's simply capturing information that of everyone who's applying. But we believe that link will eventually go away. Okay, any questions? Are we okay?
Yeah, I have a quick question. So, for the letters of recommendation, will those be directly submitted to the school, or will we collect those and then submit them?
Nope, that's an excellent question. The person that you need their email. You put in, if you fill in their name and their email, and then an automated form is sent to them that says that you are requesting a letter of recommendation for application for admission. So the form gives them, and so it's a good idea to contact them and say, hey, can you give me an enthusiastic letter of recommendation, and then tell them that it's going to be coming from OSU. I don't know the URL. I don't know what the address is that the application form comes from, but it's clearly, admissions to Ohio State. So
Okay.
you'll want to let them know to kind of expect that, and don't just delete, they're not being solicited. It's important.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I'm trying to hesitate in case any other questions come up. Okay. So this is on our end, this is what happens, just so that you know. So we are trying to speed this process up on our end, meaning the faculty. So the application deadline is December 1, and then usually in mid to late December, which you can imagine the timing of this is not ideal for persons who might be, in a faith tradition, who celebrate, faith holidays, Hanukkah, Christmas, etc. But mid-December is when the files come to us electronically. And so we read the files over the winter break, and we come back in early January. Not only are we starting a new semester, but we're also getting ourselves together in terms of who are we going to interview. A lot of times people ask, how many people apply? And this varies from year to year, as you can imagine. Things going on in the world will change these numbers dramatically. But I've been at Ohio State. I've been a professor now for almost 30 years. I've been a counselor for over 30 years. And the process is always fraught with a lot of tension for people who are waiting to hear. We get approximately 150 applications, and of that 150, we admit 12 to 14 people in the school track and 12 to 14 people in the clinical track. The criteria on which those decisions are made have to do with, people's academic preparation. So yes, their grades and GRE, yes. But also, who are they as human beings? And that we see in that letter of application, that letter of intent. That's where we see who you are as a human being. And we read those very carefully, because what we're trying to identify are people who understand what counseling is, who are able to speak to, the profession. So going to check out on the American Counseling Association, ACA, which is at counseling.org, and the American School Counseling Association, which is schoolcounselor.org. And these organizations will give you really important information about what is it that counselors do. So you can think about, what is it that I bring that meets these professional criteria. So from that applicant pool, we identify approximately 50 people, 25, at least 25 to 30 on each side, that we're going to invite to interview. And it's a group interview. Now, that does not mean that you're sitting right next to somebody trying to say something better than that person. The group interview is only to give us a sense of how people interact with each other when they're in conversation with each other. You're given a prompt, and then you respond to that prompt in your conversations with each other. And then you're also in an individual interview with an individual faculty person. You're getting to talk to current students and ask them about their experiences. You're also asked to provide a writing sample. And this is an event that takes place on a Saturday in February. And we try to get it earlier and earlier in February. So we work very hard to get all these files read, to identify the people we want to meet. We invite you, we give you at least 2 weeks notice. And I realize for people who are out of town that it means, yikes, 2 weeks. And we're hoping people will be able to come to Columbus, because you really want to see the campus. I mean, behind me, this is our building, picture of our building. But the campus, do you feel welcome on the campus? Do you feel comfortable and safe on this campus? You want to actually walk the campus if at all possible. You want to get to know what Columbus is like as a community. Does it meet your personal value system? Is it a comfortable place? Columbus is known as the San Francisco of the Midwest. We have a robust and visible LGBTQI community. That community is represented on campus, as is our African American Black community, our Hispanic community. We have a gigantic international student community. So these are things that are the way the campus feels, right? You can't get that from a remote interview like this, because of course the sun is shining in my little picture here behind us, when we know that the sun does not always shine in Columbus, right? So in that group interview, it's very important. We really hope people sometimes are international, so we sometimes have Zoom meetings, but for this process, but it really, we really want everyone to be able to come. It's very important. Then of those 50 people, we recommend to the graduate school 12 to 14 in each track for the admissions recommendation. And then you get a letter from us, and we decide that day, the interview day, is when we decide who we're recommending for admission. You'll get an admission invitation. We know that people are probably applying to multiple schools. They're probably thinking about multiple programs. And so we have a waiting list. We have the people that we are inviting, and then we have people that we would love to be able to work with, but don't have the room for, unless someone in that initial list declines the invitation. And that happens every year. So the waiting list is not a bad thing. It's simply a way of us being able to include as many people as possible as other decisions are made in life. Does that make sense, I hope? Yeah. So we do ask you to let us know what your decision is. And then the summer is pretty quiet. Like right now, it's pretty quiet, except for I'm still emailing students to tell them about what fall is going to look like relative to admissions. So we do have our orientation in fall. Right now, we don't know if this will be virtual or if it'll be in person. So one of the things that is happening in our program across campus is we are all being asked by the university to think about what is the preferred way of engaging in the learning process. Is that in person? Is that a hybrid? Or is that a virtual environment? And so we, one of the comments that we have heard repeatedly by the university is that we don't believe that we're going to go back to business as it was, that we're not going to go back to assuming all of our meetings with all of our students will always be in person. So as a counselor, I started that sentence. As a counselor, I believe in person to person. But this past year, we've seen telehealth become very, very important. We've seen classes. I've taught my classes on Zoom like this. We realize that there are options in our program that we might keep a hybrid format for some of our classes. And we might keep a more distance virtual Zoom presence for some of our classes. Right now, it's hard to see what that might look like, but just kind of heads up that some of your classes will be in person. The counseling skills, the actual foundation techniques class, we believe that will always be in person, even though it may be with masks, and even though it may be 6 feet apart. Counseling person to person will always be the first way we train. And then from there, telehealth might be a new class that we offer. So, okay. So I'm very interested in what questions that you might have for me, and in order to help you understand the process or the profession or the classes or anything at all.
I have a quick question about the whole admission process that you were just going over.
Mm-hmm.
So typically, when would you hear about the first initial invitation to interview?
That's a good question. At the same time that we email, all this is by email also. I needed to also, that's important to note. All of this is by email. So at the same time that we're emailing out to people to invite them to participate, we also send an email to the people that we're not inviting, and letting them know that they won't be invited for an interview. So we're trying to give people information that they could use then to make decisions about how they want to move forward.
Okay. And you did say that if you were to get an admission invitation the day of the interview, you hear that on that day. Is that correct?
It would be, you would hear it within a week, because it takes us a week to get all the get the emails out. So it's generally within a week that you would get the email inviting you to the, and the people who are not going to be invited for admission, they also get an email telling them that they would not be invited for admission at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
For anyone that doesn't make it into the program, do you recommend that they try applying again the next year, or is that usually not appropriate?
No, that's a good question. On occasion, we can point directly to something that a person could do, like, for example, so if a person does not have any experience at all working with kids and they would like to be a school counselor, it's possible that they would not perhaps rise to the top of that applicant list. So in that case, it would be easy to write a letter saying, we recommend that you get some volunteer or some experience with kids and then apply again. We have had, we recently had an applicant who was, who I believe, although he said he was not diagnosed, but I believe he was someone who was living with Asperger's syndrome. And because his conversations and connections with other people during the in-person interviews were completely fractured. So I actually met with him and sat down and talked with him about where might he apply, because he really wanted to work with kids. And so we talked about what kinds of jobs exist where he could work with kids that might not, where his communication might not impede the work he wanted to accomplish. So we talked about a variety of options, and that's an exception when I sat down and actually met with him to talk to him more about it. So we try to be helpful. I mean, it isn't like, oh, you're no good, or, just, we try to help. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Hi, this is Lisa again. I've got a question that may be more that we can take offline. I think you could probably tell from my gray hair, I am a non-traditional entry into your program, and so I wanted to find out what how is that viewed by?
Oh.
I'd like to think I know the answer, but I think it bears asking.
Absolutely.
I'll preface this by saying I think because of my age, it would have something to bring to the table in a different way that would be perhaps valued. But I would like to hear your take on an older student applying.
Absolutely. Thank you. That is a frequently asked question. So when I first started at OSU like 15 years ago, our student population was almost 100% traditional age. So, students who just graduated with their bachelor's and were coming into the program. But that has changed. So now I would venture to say in every cohort, there's at least 50% non-traditional students.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so I agree 100%. Being a non-traditional student myself when I did this, that yeah, it does bring, we want a diversity of voices in the profession, and that means diversity of experience and diversity of life experience, diversity of backgrounds. So it's not just psychology that needs to be entering. We've had in the past pre-law, we've had engineers, we've had nurses, teachers, yes, psychology, yes, sociology. We've also had African studies, African and gender studies graduates. We've had, did I say business? But just a super wide range, and all of these individuals have been successful in the program because they all bring something unique. Not every client is going to connect with everybody who just looks like me. And I'm not going to be effective with only people who look like me. So we need that richness of diversity in order to serve our clients and their communities.
Okay, thank you. That leads me to a second part question. And I think at some point I may need to sit down with an advisor or someone like yourself to really pick away at my unique situation. So I have all three of my degrees from Ohio State. Mm-hmm. I've done a lot of adjunct work with my PhD in STEM from Ohio State not that long ago. So Ohio State's the only place I've ever known since 1988, I might add. So I would assume that some of the application may look slightly different. I don't know that. My GRE is older than 5 years, but if they accepted me and handed me a doctorate, then I'm probably okay from our fine Buckeye Nation. So that would be one caveat question that we can take offline because nobody else cares about that but me, understandably. And then also in that line of thinking, I'm wondering if I might be exempt from some of the research requirements of the program because I have done what I've done with my schooling. Is that correct?
Yes. The research class is the only class that we can transfer in.
Okay.
Yep. So that class, and if you've taken the intro to exception, well, your interest is in the clinical mental health track.
Correct.
Okay,
I've taken the mental or the class for exceptional children. I'm a 29-year in school teacher in gifted
yes.
education. So that
Okay.
was part of that master's degree. So
Right.
again, I know I'm asking very specific questions, but and you won't, I won't be put off in any way if we should take that offline. So
Sure. We can do that. Yeah, we can do that.
great. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm excited.
Awesome. That's what we need. We need that energy. Yeah.
So you mentioned that for the like school counseling track, you might be looking for people who have had experiences working with children.
Mhm.
Is there any type of experience you're looking for people who are interested in the clinical mental health track?
That's a really good question. I think, I'm trying to recall conversations with my colleagues. I do not believe that there is the expectation that you've got experience with clients who are experiencing the challenges that you would like to focus on as a counselor. Because it isn't possible to always have volunteer experiences with persons living with chemical dependency, for example, or persons living with psychoses, or people living with depression. So I don't believe that there's that same hope that you would have had life or volunteer experiences with people specific to that population. So I wouldn't worry about that. But if you have it, that's great. If you have it, that's terrific. Does that make sense? Don't feel like you have to have it.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. I recognize this silence. That's usually people. Oh, good, a question. Yay. Okay.
Okay, yes. I was wondering, so I'm interested in the school counseling track, and do you have typical schools in the Columbus area that you usually like work with, or is it around Ohio? I mean, I assume it would have to be in the Columbus area since we're taking classes there. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, they're in the Columbus area.
Okay.
We have schools that are charter. We have schools that are public. We have schools that are multi-level, so that's very cool. We have a technical, one of the career schools. We have religious-based schools. Some people are comfortable with that, others are not. It's fine. We ask you those questions before we look for a pairing, before we look for a
Okay.
placement site.
So like I'm specifically interested in like working with like elementary schools, so we would have
Okay.
that conversation and get placed appropriately then.
Yep. We ask you what level you're interested in, what levels. Like we ask you to rank them 1, 2, and 3, because then we try to get and in almost without exception, we're able to get you into an experience with your top preference. Some people say, I don't know, I don't have any idea, and then we will work to get you all 3 levels.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. So like I mentioned earlier, I'm a school teacher. So I work in a high school in a credit recovery program.
Mhm.
It recently got shut down because of budget cuts. So like I'm out of a job, but I'm going to be looking for jobs again, full-time, like teaching positions this year. If I were to get one, work this next year, and then get into the program for next year, would it be plausible to think I'd be able to do both at least when I'm not doing the practicum?
That's a really good question. One of the ways that we've actually had people make a commitment to doing full-time subbing while they're in their program, because that gives them the scheduling flexibility to try to schedule their subbing days so it alternates with their field experience days.
Right.
I think it would involve some like careful scheduling, but I think it can be done. The one thing that we can't do is we can't have you do your field placement at the same school that you're working.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I don't know if I'm like necessarily going to go into school counseling, because
Okay.
I know a lot of the school counselors I've talked to have said that it ends up being where they're the ones giving the tests and, not really doing what I want to be doing,
Mhm, mhm,
and more
mhm,
paperwork more than anything.
mhm.
So I don't know necessarily.
Especially, yeah,
Yeah.
especially at the high school level.
Yeah,
Mhm,
right.
mhm,
So I don't know exactly where I'm going to be going into, but yeah.
mhm.
So if I were to do like mental health, uh, I mean, I guess that wouldn't really conflict with that, right?
No, it would depend on where your placement is, but we always have, I mean, literally, we have students who are every semester they negotiate their schedule with their placement site and with their work or other life commitments.
Okay.
And so there's no expectation that it has to be these hours of your placement. And one of the things that is flexible about the clinical um, side of the program is that some of the placements are on the weekends, or some of the placements do have broader range of hours than schools do, and so there's more options for people to be able to fit work and their classes and internship into 1 week.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
I have a follow-up. I'm trying to plan my retirement around this program. So I'm at a different place. So I'm glad that question was asked earlier. So to follow up with that, you think it is possible for going the clinical counseling route to finish out the rest of my school teacher life and do maybe weekend or evening practicum / internship?
It would need to, the internship is 20 hours a week.
Okay.
So that would make for some really intense weekends.
Mhm.
But
Interesting. Okay.
yeah, it's possible.
Figure out the timing of it all.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure.
I have a question. You mentioned that you graduate with like a licensure for the counseling. Does that apply just to this, just to Ohio, or can you take it like to a different state?
Okay, that's a really good question. So, when you graduate, then you sit for the first exam as a clinical. Are you speaking clinical mental health?
Either, yeah.
Or the school? Okay, so yes. So for both the clinical mental health and for school counseling, after you graduate, there is a professional licensure exam and that you sit for that qualifies you to be licensed in Ohio. One of the things about the Ohio laws is that they are more rigorous than other states. Once you have that license, it is easier to go to another state and request, it's called reciprocity, where they accept your license. They may have, oh, well, you need one more semester of diagnosis or something. They may have one, I don't know, unique request or requirement. But most of the time, the students who have gone to Pennsylvania, Illinois, Indiana, et cetera, have been able to not transfer the license. I need to be clear on my language, but been able to apply for licensure in another state using their Ohio license and been able to get that state's license with a minimum of additional requirements. So
Okay.
It isn't automatic, although ACA and NBCC, the National Board for Certified Counselors, and ACA, the American Counseling Association, are both working very hard on trying to establish national requirements so that it could be possible to move from one state to another and then have your license follow you. It's that case for psychology. So if psychology can figure it out,
Thank you.
we can figure it out. But that's been a sticking point. We haven't been able to get there yet, but they're working very hard on it. And I was originally licensed because I'm a trailing spouse. So I was originally licensed in Nevada, then went to Kansas, then went to Wisconsin, then went to South Carolina, then came to Ohio. And moving that license from one state to another meant in some cases starting over with supervision, and in some cases taking additional classes, and in some, I mean, it was just ridiculous. Sorry, it was ridiculous. Oh, so frustrating. But what we usually recommend is if you graduate and you know you're going to be moving to a new state, I know it's going to sound expensive, but if you move to a new state without the license in hand, then you have to meet all the requirements that that state has for a new licensee. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Whereas if you show up with your Ohio license, you've already proven you've met all the requirements, and then they may say, well, we need one thing, as opposed to moving without the license, and then you're just like every other graduate in that state, and you have to meet all their requirements. And that can add ridiculous numbers of credits.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So let us know, like, you know, what we do is we encourage people, if you know you're going to be moving, like we've had people who are living in the military, and so they know that they're going to be deployed, or they know they're moving, and then we can help you talk through how do you go about finding out what that state requires. Can you meet those now? Get them on your transcript here, and then you just move to that state. You've already got it all. You know, that's the ideal, hopefully.
I have a question that kind of goes along with licensing. So I know you said earlier that you had an alumni moved to Texas, and she couldn't be a school counselor because you need to be a teacher first.
Right.
Are a lot of states like that where you have to be a teacher first?
Texas.
Only Texas?
Only Texas.
Okay.
It used to be Texas and Nebraska and Illinois, but then Nebraska and Illinois saw the light.
Okay.
And because you don't need to be a teacher to be an effective school counselor.
Yeah, that's
It's a
what I
whole
thought.
different profession, whole different way of working with kids.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right, thank you.
Uh-huh.
I had a question as well regarding the clinical mental health program.
Okay.
So essentially, I know that there are a lot of different approaches to counseling, whether it be theories or methods. And I was wondering if this program focuses on a few select methods and really strengthening those, or if you allow for like a toolbox of approaches for counselors.
That is an excellent question. We teach all of the theories. It's one of my classes. I get to teach it and I love it. But you're going to learn all the theories, and then the challenge then, right, is in your practicum is figuring out which ones work for you. Like, and we do not teach you to be eclectic. We do not encourage you to be, oh, I'll do this and I'll do that and I'll do that. Because if ever you're called into court to justify what you did with any individual client, you need to be able to talk from a theoretical foundation that this is research-based in this theory, that this is effective with this issue.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I know there are programs that, teach, CBT, or they teach play therapy, and that's the only, no, we teach you all of those. And then we ask you in practicum to practice one or two of them to see which one fits you, so that you can be operating from the way you naturally believe people are. Because each theory has literally an explanation for how we are who we are, how we get to how we evolve, how we become, and then if things go wrong, how do we get back on track? Each theory has its own unique perspective that explains all of that. So you need to learn all of them in order to really understand which one fits with your personal experiences and your personal beliefs about how we get where we are.
Right. Oh, that sounds like a smart approach. Thanks.
Yeah. Now, the flip side of that is that frequently our students have said that they wish they had more theory. They wish that they had, because no counseling program in the country gives you every single thing that you're ever going to need as a professional. So every one of you will graduate thinking, oh man, I wish I had more of this. And that's part of your own kind of professional development, is conferences, workshops, webinars, all those kinds of things is how people keep up to date and keep improving their skills.
Right on. Good to know.
Like an example, just real quick, you know, as a practicing school counselor, you know, we were trained to watch for, you know, symptoms and signs of eating disorders, because in the 90s, that was in 80s, that was kind of what the some of the prevailing ways that kids were expressing their pain. And then all of a sudden, people started saying, wait a minute, what's this cutting? What is happening here? People are cutting. Basically, students knew that the adults were watching them for this way of expressing their pain and disordered eating. And so the way that they express their pain changed. And so that's a prime example in my lifetime about how, you know, we were trained to look for this, but then in reality, as time changed and people changed how they express their pain, then we had to learn, what does cutting mean? And why is cutting, can, you know, it can mean trauma, but it can also be socially contagious. There were cutting parties. Why are there cutting parties? Why are kids teaching each other how to do that? That kind of thing.
Right on. So continued education is key, right there.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Thanks, Jack.
Thank you.
So what are you guys thinking right now? Are you thinking, oh, I don't know, or are you feeling like you've had most of your questions answered? And
before we answer that, I'm just going to go ahead and let everyone know that we're going to stop the recording, so your personal thoughts won't be on our YouTube.
Thank you, Juliana.